Hello. I'm going to talk about why and how kids end up in adult court and why, if you are voting in California, this matters on Tuesday. I'm going to start out by telling you about a guy named Daniel Mendoza. When he was 14 years old, Danny Mendoza, this was in 2009, with a group of friends, they got into a fight with a homeless man who lived nearby them in Oxnard, in Oxnard. And they ended up killing this man. It was a large group of individuals. A few months later, they were arrested. So I'm going to play some audio from Danny. Is the speaker on, do you know? Or maybe it's off.
I think it is.
It was only after the fact, that I was, I sat down in my room and just kind of couldn't believe what I had done.
Can you hear that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So after this happened, Danny's case was sent to adult court. As I said, he was 14 years old. So he ended up in adult court, and the prosecutor wanted to give him 50 years to life as a sentence for this crime that he took part in. As his lawyer fought it, Danny went to the Santa Cruz Juvenile Hall. And while he was there, initially what he really wanted to do was just piss off the guards because he did not care for authority. He had never cared for it. He'd grown up in a highly policed community. But I'll let him tell you.
Slowly, I was investing in my education. I started not to only show up, but actually do the work. One of the lead teachers there where I was incarcerated got me to take college courses. Where I come from, we don't really think about graduating high school, let alone going to college. I saw the tree.
So for Danny, he eventually got bored and he decided to change. He also started to make connections with these mentors that would come through the juvenile hall. And he continued to take high school courses. He graduated from high school there inside the juvenile hall, and even continued to take these college courses that he felt very proud of. So sort of miraculously, 4.5 years later, he got a surprise, and it was that his case was getting bumped back down to juvenile court, meaning his sentence would be much shorter than it would otherwise be. And because he had served this time and he had improved so much, he was also going to be released very shortly. So he was released.
I saw grass, like my feet even have forgotten how it felt to step on grass. What helped my situation is that I was given rehabilitative services. I was given school programs, mentors. And that changed the whole picture.
So today, Danny is 21 years old, and he goes to UC Davis. He's a junior there, and he's studying criminal justice and juvenile justice. So what allows something like this to happen for a 14-year-old who admittedly commits a terrible crime that impacts a person, but for this 14-year-old to be sent to adult court? And basically, the history behind this is what happened in the 90s when we had a variety of people, both media and experts, talking about this concept of a super predator. And so many of the states passed laws that made it much tougher on crime for juveniles. So what happened in California was we passed something called Proposition 21, and this allowed us to try 14 to 17-year-olds as adults. And they already were able to be tried as adults, but what happened was, at this point in Proposition 21, it allowed a prosecutor the sole discretion, the sole decision power to decide to send them to adult court, as opposed to a judge. So this is something that's called direct file. And so there are basically 3 ways right now that young people can end up in adult court. The first one is mandatory direct file. So if a young person commits a crime that is so egregious that it will just they're charged with something that is very egregious, they will definitely be going to adult court. Then there's something that really is what I was focusing on this past summer, which is discretionary direct file, where a prosecutor has the sole responsibility and power to send this young person to adult court. And the last one is a fitness hearing. And a fitness hearing would be in front of a judge. It would be something where the juvenile is represented by their own public defender, and then there's a prosecutor, and both sides are presenting evidence. So most people feel that the fitness hearing does allow for much more information, and in theory, fewer people to go to adult court as juveniles. So, and basically direct file is something that can be used for crimes like murder or robbery or assault with a firearm. It's not for inconsequential crimes. What's happening on Tuesday is we're voting on something called Proposition 57, and part of Proposition 57 says no more direct file, no more trying juveniles as adults when the decision is made solely by a prosecutor. Part of the issue when those decisions are made is that a prosecutor is making them behind closed doors, and there is not public criteria. There's no record of what happened, what that conversation entailed, if it was between two people, if there was just one prosecutor. They also have about 48 hours or 24 hours to make that decision. So a lot of advocates for juveniles and for youth are opposed to this. So what 57 would do is, if it passes, there will be no more direct file. The way that juveniles would end up in adult court would only be through a fitness hearing, which does allow more information to come through. So that would be, again, in front of the judge where the two sides are presenting evidence. So some of the other issues that I found with direct file, and this was based on a ton of amazing work that a lot of organizations have already put out there, but some of the challenges with direct file are things like its uneven application. As you can imagine, part of that is due to geography. In a place like Kings County, for example, that's in the Central Valley, a young person who has committed a serious crime is 78 times more likely to be direct filed than in a place like Los Angeles. That's huge. That's a huge difference. Another uneven application is another study that recently came out from the Center for Juvenile Criminal Justice showed that Republican DAs are 3 times more likely to use direct file than Democratic DAs. And then, of course, there are racial disparities. Even after you adjust for the disproportionate number of youth of color in the judicial system, Latino and Black youth are still twice as likely to be direct filed than their white counterparts. And so why does this matter? If a young person ends up with an adult sentence and they end up in an adult prison eventually as a younger person, they are much more likely to be raped, they're more likely to commit suicide, they're more likely to be sent to solitary confinement, and when they get out, to recidivate. So what I had the opportunity to do this summer, which was an amazing thing for me, was produce 4 pieces for KQED Public Radio. I've since graduated from the journalism school. I'm now a reporter at KQED. 4 of those pieces were radio pieces. If you'd like to hear them, Danny's story was one of them. You can just Google Prop 57 KQED and hear those. And this opportunity was amazing for me because I really got to delve into an issue I know very little about, and it's really expanded my scope of my reporting. So not only can I report on the beat that I'm already working on, which is health, but expand it to justice. I also want to say that one of my huge takeaways from this fellowship was the opportunity to think about doing no harm to the people that I interview every day, because I'm regularly interacting with people who have been through serious trauma, and that was something that just meeting with the fellows just a few times reminded me of. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you so much.